Well, no, it's got tea and then in parentheses, water and tea powder.
Oh, okay,
And then after that is sugar,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, so after a while, I have to check this again. This is, our granddaughter Kaya is playing in a tennis tournament in Austin, Texas this weekend.
Oh,
And she just got beat by the number 2 seed. She's the number 4 seed for her age.
no,
But she plays a consolation person at 6:30, so.
Hmm.
She's
oh, good for her.
playing now.
Mm.
So I'll check after a while. I'll turn off the sound though.
That's it for school? Oh, just for tennis?
She, just
Okay.
for tennis.
Okay.
Just for fun.
I was gonna say, odd to have a school
I
function on
doubt if
Sunday.
it's just for fun,
Well,
according to,
yeah.
yeah, this particular. Her mother grew up as a tennis player and her parents took her all over the country for contests. So these girls are following suit.
They're gonna be tennis.
They were in New York City for the regionals for this, and Kaya won her regional at her age level, so she gets, this is nationals. This is the national contest. And she was seeded 4th, so she, got right down to the
Yeah.
end, but was beat by the number 2 seed,
And what's her age now?
11.
So it's just 1 year, it's not 11 to 12.
Right.
really, it's just
Yes.
11 years.
They have from 8 through 12, girls and boys.
8 years old to 12 years old?
And they each have, so they each play, 8-year-olds play 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds play 9-year-olds.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens. Karina, her sister, is doing pretty well too. She wasn't ranked, but she got toward the end of her, she was beat, she won the first one, she was beat in the second round by the number 1 seed. And then she's been playing in the consolation bracket, and she was close to the end before she got beat again, so. Doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I liked to play tennis, and I could seldom won. But it
I
was
like to play
fun.
tennis too, but not on this level. I'm sure my
No.
granddaughters could beat me pretty easily.
Probably.
I probably wouldn't even get my serve over the net. But
I remember when I used to go down to this tennis court,
me too.
I always wanted to be on
Other side, so you didn't have to look into the
the,
sun.
on the right side, yeah.
Uh-huh. That's right. Well. Blank canvas.
Yeah, it's like it. Your mom coming?
So, I think so. Try to make it here and see, went to Marshalltown, so and see, makes it here, see, makes it.
said she went to see Mason.
No,
Went to
see,
Marshalltown.
Marshalltown,
Okay, okay,
taking care of her mom.
okay. Well, I didn't get that at all.
And Becky had an exciting day yesterday.
Mm-hmm, I did.
You do.
I went to Knoxville. First of all, the ride was beautiful. You ever driven that Highway 14
The
to
Knoxville?
Red Rock? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Have you? Well, this is my second time. My grandson lives there. And they had a wedding shower yesterday. So family was there.
Hmm.
It was a wonderful day.
Good.
But the road, and everything around the road was just beautiful. The trees and the hills, big hills and little hills and way beyond and the corn and more corn than beans, so. It was, and then you come upon Red Rock. I just never had been to Red Rock before.
Hmm.
It's beautiful.
Big lake.
It is a big lake. There wasn't one boat on it.
Long
though.
bridge.
Yeah, and I loved it. Yeah, I felt like I was someplace bigger than where I was. Yeah. It's pretty. I can tell you a story. We're waiting for Deb. Kaylee, Brendan's bride-to-be, lost her mom when she was real young. She was worried, kind of concerned about this shower because her mom wouldn't be there. And it was going to be a hard time for her. And somebody gave her one of her gifts. She opened it and it was a recipe book. It was in a folder, like a hard folder with those slips, the clear plastic things that you can stick your recipes in or whatever, your paper in. And the first page she got, and she went like this, and the lady that gave it to her said, "Those are the recipes from your family." And on the first page is a recipe from your mom. It's her handwriting. And it just brought the tears to her eyes so fast.
I'll bet.
Oh, it was, I don't know, I'm sure it was meant to be, and they were sentimental tears, not,
Yeah.
it just awakens the emotions inside of you. Anyway, I thought that was touching, and the second thing that happened was touching to me. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but Kelly just Amazoned the gift to her, and so it wasn't wrapped, it just came in an Amazon box. Well, I take that back, it was a Bed Bath and Beyond box. What difference does it make?
Yeah.
It wasn't wrapped. And she got in there and dug through all the paper, and it was a waffle iron. And she said, "Oh, a waffle iron. I really don't like waffles," but it was on her list. So somebody put it on the list, and
So does
she
Brenda
wrote
like
out, "Yes,
Waffles.
but my husband loves waffles. I can't wait to tell him we got a waffle iron." Does that tell you what kind of a wife Brendan's getting? It tells me what kind of a wife. She thinks about her husband even at her shower. Her name is Kaylee. They're getting married the end of October. She's a sweetheart. As long as we're sitting here, I've been asked to read at their wedding, and I get to choose. I love 1 Corinthians 13, of course, but I went to, I should ask you too, cause you were there, to, Kinsey and James's wedding. It was beautiful, Gideon, and I wanted to get whatever it was he read, and he's been so busy he hasn't had time to do that, but I've been looking and looking. I found the Methodist, it's, can't think of the word. Starts with a C. Anyway, it's for a wedding. And do you know, have you read that? Have you?
Well, there's a wedding ceremony in the hymnal. And,
It's-
and there's a wedding
It's
ceremony.
not the ceremony, it's just
It's just a,
reading.
hmm,
It doesn't tell you what to do.
Okay.
It was nice. But Mike and you two, do you know any unfamiliar
but
scripture
meaningful.
that would pertain to a wedding? You with all your knowledge? I've looked it up on Google and found some things that are nice, but either too long or just not right. I think one of the nicest things I found here. I thought I wrote it down here. Colossians 3:12 through 17. Isaiah talks a lot about love.
Well, that'd be a good one.
Which one? Colossians?
Colossians
Yeah.
3.
Do you like that? I
Oh,
do.
yeah, I like it.
But is there a better one? About, I
It
want,
just, it kinda gotta tailor it to who it is too.
well, I want
You
some,
know that,
yes,
I have no idea.
I want something that is challenging as well as to bring them to wanting to know more about Christ. And I wanted,
You want a challenging one?
well, not, I also want it to be one that blesses their marriage and encourages them. I guess I wanted both of them in the same little passage. The only thing about Colossians, it says, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Does that mean people that have given themselves to God, doesn't it? I know they haven't done that.
Well, that doesn't mean they're not God's chosen ones.
That's I think they are, they just don't know it yet.
Like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
there's one in Ephesians,
what's that one?
talks
Can you
about
read it
wives
to me?
and husbands. Ephesians 5:22.
Can you read it to me?
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes a little ways. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So that one's one to consider. It talks a lot about Christ and the church, and they might not know as much about that as some of it. It's one that is pretty familiar.
I did.
Hi.
What were you talking about?
Becky's supposed to read a scripture at a wedding, and she was
Oh,
asking for some
Possibilities.
possibilities. Carolyn was giving her one.
And she had a good one already, and, well, she had two good ones already.
who's getting married?
My grandson. Denny's second oldest. His first oldest is Brittany, and Mindy brought Brittany and Brendan into their marriage. So they still are his son and daughter and my grandkids. He's getting married at the end of October.
Oh. Now, he's not the one that was here, the one that's so tall.
That's Cole and
Yeah,
Cole
that
is,
was the name.
yeah. Cole is, he's graduated too, but he has a girlfriend, but he's not getting married.
Cole's the youngest, or Hannah's the
Hannah's
youngest?
the youngest.
Okay.
Do you still have, Carolyn,
Here's some things right here, look here. Principles of marriage, and there's 5 or 6 different things.
okay, I'll write that down later. Do you still have the bulletin from Kinsey's Smith?
Probably not.
I wanted to save it, and I know I did, but I don't know where I put it.
I probably
I
have
looked.
it somewhere.
Do you?
Well, I'm saying that, I'll look for it.
Okay. Oh, I'd
I'll look. I know it was on my desk for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. You like the service too?
I did, and I saved things like that,
Mm-hmm.
at least for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and that has been a while ago. But,
Mhm.
it gets put on my desk, and
You keep looking
I
at
may
it.
have even had two of them, and I don't know why. I would've, but I'll only keep one, but I'll look.
And thank you. And thank you for the exercises.
You probably already had some of those,
I
didn't you?
did, but there are different ones on there that are easier to do, but I can see why they're good for you. So, thank you, Deb.
You're welcome. And I was looking for, I told you I'd bring you the Northern that had that 50 years ago thing,
Oh,
and there's 5 of them sitting on our table, and I thought it had to be there. I couldn't find it,
it's okay. It's okay.
but I wanted to, sometime you'll have to discuss that with me, because there was stuff I just didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just getting really good at putting things in places where I never find them again, no matter what.
I was just telling Mike and Carolyn and Kyle about the bride-to-be. And she had on her gift register just tons of Tupperware things to organize her cupboards. And she said, this also tells you what kind of girl she is. Everything has its place. So, whoa, and I'm thinking about me. Yeah, and I can't find this service that I loved so much. But anyway, if Kaylee would have put it somewhere, she would know exactly where it is.
But she might not 40 years from now.
You're right about that too.
Well, we can start an exodus tonight.
Let's see.
Let's get to digging.
Okay.
I'm excited because I came to that thing on Saturday and I was looking at Kyle. He made so many references to Exodus.
Who did?
Pastor Gideon.
Yeah. And just what he made, I did, if I was ever taught that or ever read it, I didn't remember it. I remembered the 40 years, but what was it? They were only supposed to be there 3 months or
For
something?
about a year. It should have taken them. He said they started out in Egypt and they were supposed to go down and up to the promised land.
It doesn't take that long to
Yeah,
walk that far.
well,
It doesn't take 40 years.
no. But he said because they were influenced by the culture of the day, they just kept going round and round.
Mhm.
And there was another one too, I can't remember what it was, and I thought, I'm glad we're gonna,
It was just
Yeah.
meant for us to hear, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. It was good. Made us know we're doing the right study.
Well done.
We're excited.
Well, let's start out with a prayer. Father, you are above all, you are guess we better get our bearings here with this first. Exodus is a part of what is commonly called, or maybe not so commonly called, it is known as the Pentateuch, or the Torah, or the Book of Moses.
Oh,
It's the first 5 books in our canon. It's part of that. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are together termed the Pentateuch, which is 5 something teachings. I don't think that's what it is, though. But it's 5. The Torah, which is a Hebrew word for the book of the law, or sometimes it's referred to, all 5 books, as the Book of Moses, one book.
so, excuse me, Mike, but this is, Exodus is the whole Torah, or all those books that you said?
All 5 of them together.
All 5 of them are
We
the Torah.
separated it into 5 books,
Okay,
but
Here's that other word.
it's all one.
and what,
What was
you
the other
gave
word?
us 3 words.
Pentateuch,
Now,
which is P-E-N-T-A-E-U-C-H.
T-E-A-C-H. But it's,
is
oh,
what it says in.
P-E-N-T-E-N?
No,
T-E-U-C-H.
P-E-N-T-A-T-E-U-C-H. I had to look it up, because I knew how to say it, but it was,
Just what Carolyn was.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
the beginning of it.
So the Torah is all 5 books, and the books are again Exodus and
Yeah, Genesis.
Genesis, Exodus,
Leviticus, Numbers,
the
and
next,
Deuteronomy.
in order here.
The first 5.
Okay.
So that's how it's historically been recognized, but like most history, it tends to fade. The date it was written, where it took place, this Exodus, the date that Exodus took place was 15th century BC. The middle of the 15th century. We can be fairly certain of that. We have we've got to go outside of Exodus, but we go to 1 Kings 6:1, and that'll give us a hint as the date. Or this is not really a hint, it's just kind of, here it is. We gotta do a little extrapolation, but not much. 1 Kings 6. It says, in the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. So there we establish a time frame for when this event that First Kings is describing took place. 480 years after the people entered the promised land. In the 4th year, and it specifically in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he, this is Solomon, began to build the house of the Lord. So, we know from historical accounts that that date was 966 BC.
956?
966 BC is when Solomon began to build the house, is the temple. And so we have the 480 years mentioned there. So we take, and we're going BC, so then we add. So we take 966 and add 480. And we get 1446 BC. Oh, I misspoke. I got confused with the next one in Judges we're going to. It says in the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. So that's why we don't have to be concerned about the 40-year wandering. This is when, this is 480 years from the time Solomon started building the temple to going back to the, basically the Passover, first Passover, when they came out, when the Pharaoh drove them out. So that's where that 966 plus 480, that's 1446 BC. So that's the middle of the 15th century BC. That's where they get that date at.
And following, it's right here, that's all here too, Kyle, on page 140.
What does it say in your Bible there, something like that?
480, 966, 1446.
In First Kings or,
No, in Exodus.
oh.
In the
it says that,
introduction to
Introduction.
Exodus.
Yeah, I see it.
Mhm.
And we can kind of get another confirmation of that in Judges. 11:26. Your Kings go to the left a little bit and you'll get the Judges. It's right between Joshua and Ruth. Remember that? Joshua, Judges, Ruth.
Oh,
Silly things that I remember.
Which chapter in Judges, please?
11, verse 26. So, this is Japheth, or Jephthah's talking here, who was a judge over Israel. And he's recounting the history. And we know that from Jewish records that Jephthah lived around 1100 BC. And here in verse 26 he says, while Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and in Aroer and its villages, and in all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, 300 years, why did you not deliver them within that time? So, the time that Israel entered the promised land up until this time Jephthah was speaking was 300 years. They hadn't been delivered yet, is his complaint to God. And so if we take that 1100 BC, at the time that this Jephthah lived, and he says 300 years they've been in the land, then that puts it at, we add those two together, because we're in BC, that puts it at 1400 BC, but they are in the land, so we gotta add the 40 years onto this one to get to when they came out, to the time of the Exodus. See that? So that ends up being 1440 BC. So that kind of confirms the scripture in First Kings. So I think they're probably on pretty solid footing when you go to 1443 or 1446 BC is the, somewhere in the middle of the 15th century BC for the time of the Exodus. And of course, like most everything, there's disagreement on that. Some scholars argue that it was in the, for a later date, in the 1300s BC. But it seems like they've got to use some clever handsprings to get to that, but the other text. And it's nothing we need to be real dogmatic on. For those of you who are interested in those things, but for me, the middle of the 15th century BC seems to be have the least amount of issues with it. So then we look at who wrote it. And it doesn't specifically say in the body of the Exodus text. It's mainly written third person, but that's not really much of an argument against Moses' authorship, because every other book in the Old Testament except Ezra and Nehemiah is written in third person. So we gotta go outside of well, we don't for a couple of texts here to look at the authorship. We get some hints in Exodus that Moses is commissioned by God to write. We get Exodus 24, 4 is one. Exodus 24:4 says, "And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord." And this is the covenant was confirmed. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules, and all the people answered with one voice and said, "All these words that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all those words. So we have Moses as a writer and a recorder. Several years ago there was a big hullabaloo that Moses lived before the time of writing. And he couldn't have written. Well, it says he wrote. And then they found some stone over in the Near East that had writings on it that dated from way before Moses' time. So writing was available at that time. So then those people kind of quieted down. And then in Exodus 34:27, we have another instance of Moses writing. And the Lord said to Moses, "Write these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." And the Lord in Exodus 34:27 commands Moses to write these words. So we have those two examples in Exodus, not of Moses claiming to write the book of Exodus, but it looks like he was writing something.
Which chapter was that?
34:27.
34:27. Thank you.
And we can go outside of Exodus, and still in the Old Testament, the Numbers 33:2. Where it says, "These are the stages of the people of Israel when they went out from the land of Egypt by their companies under the leadership of Moses and Aaron." Moses wrote down their starting places stage by stage by command of the Lord, and these are their stages according to their starting places. So here we have Numbers saying that and Moses is the author of Numbers as well, so he ought to know that he wrote down their recorded the journey in the wilderness in writing. And you don't have to go to these, most of these are just real short. I'm just showing, trying to establish a little authority here on Moses' authorship. We have Joshua 1:7-8. Where it says, Joshua talking, "Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success." So, well, this is, apparently there was a book entitled Book of the Law, and it was tied to Moses. And this is the book of Joshua, which is immediately after the Pentateuch.
Was Joshua what?
Joshua 1:7-8. And still in Joshua, chapter 8, 34 and 35. Joshua renewing the covenant in Joshua 8:34. "And afterward he read all the words of the law and blessed the blessings and the curse according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel." So the book of the law is attributed to Moses. Then we have another one in 2 Chronicles 25. 25:4. Let's see. This is referring to Amaziah, the king of Judah. But he did not put their children to death according to what is written in the law in the book of Moses. So now we have this book of the law being referred to as the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, fathers shall not die because of their children, or children die because of their fathers.
What chapter?
25, 2 Chronicles 25, verse 4.
$75.25.
25.
25, okay.
And I've got a couple more, but we don't need to read those in the Old Testament, I don't think. Got Ezra 6:18 and Nehemiah 13:1. But then we can go to New Testament and Matthew 19:7. Where it talks about, Jesus is teaching about divorce here, and he's interacting with the Pharisees. And the Pharisees said to him, Jesus, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? And this is referring to the, remember what book in the Pentateuch it is, one of the five, and it says that Moses commanded. So they have an allusion there to Moses being the author.
Deuteronomy, it says.
Hmm?
My note says Deuteronomy.
There you go. Then in Matthew 22:24. Here Jesus is interacting with the Sadducees, and the Sadducees say, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up the children for his brother. So they're taking a text out of the Pentateuch, which if, 24 is in Deuteronomy as well, and they're attributing that to Moses. And then I want to go to Mark 7:10. And this is Jesus speaking. And Jesus said, for Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles his father or mother must surely die. And there he's quoting from Exodus and says, Moses says. So Christ is attributing that to Moses' authorship. And staying in Mark, we go to 12:26. Again, this is Christ speaking, and this is Jesus again interacting with the Sadducees. These are the religious leaders of the day. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses So now we have this book of the law, and it was spoken of in a couple of places in Joshua, and then in Second Chronicles, it was termed the Book of Moses, and here Jesus refers to the Book of Moses. In the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So this again is in Exodus. And Jesus refers to it as the Book of Moses, coming from the Book of Moses, which would be all five, because it wasn't separated into five separate books. Let's see. So then we want to go to one more, John 5:46. This is again Jesus speaking. And he's interacting again with the religious leaders of his day. Because these folks know their Torah. And Jesus says, do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, on whom you have set your hope. If you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? Well, here again we have Jesus testifying to Moses as an author and a writer. So we have all that intra-biblical evidence that Moses could write, did write, was commanded by God to write, and what he wrote was what we now know as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That is not widely believed by biblical scholars.
What is
Oh,
it
yeah.
widely known?
That Moses is the author, the human author of these books. They devised, it's mainly, it's not widely believed in by biblical academics, I should say. The seminary professors and those of high learning.
Any reason why they don't believe it?
I don't know for sure, other than there seems to be when you are held in high esteem as an authority on a subject, you tend to devise intricate schemes and see hidden knowledge in things. I think it's maybe just more of an attempt to appear relevant.
Draw attention to themselves.
Hmm?
Draw attention to themselves.
Well, just to justify their their
Job
job.
security.
Or their, maybe to a larger degree, just their egos, where I am so smart, I've been taught so, I've learned so much, I know these languages inside and out, and there's gotta be more to this than what some uneducated yahoo out in the sticks sees in it. So that could play into it as well. There's a whole school, and I didn't dig into it much, because I don't have any interest in it, and it bores me silly, and I think the whole thing is silly, but maybe your Bible probably talks about this authorship of JPD, and, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Carolyn?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
But I can,
they go through the Pentateuch and they label sections of it as attributed to the, I can't remember all it's letters. J would be the, maybe, I don't know. One of them is priestly, one of them is maybe to do with, well, I'm not gonna say, unless you can find it, I'm not gonna speak, because I think the only one I really am sure of is the priestly designation. And they'll go through the text and they'll say, well, we attribute this to this group of priests that lived way back when, and we attribute this to this group of scribes that lived way back when, and they wrote this section, and the other guys wrote this section. And it's exhausting to read much of that, and how they dissect it.
this doesn't seem to say that, but
Okay.
I haven't read it
Well, that could be,
thoroughly.
that could be, but it just seems to me so unnecessary. When the Bible is not real specific, but there's enough evidence, and we just went through them all.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. You can find all these places where reference is made to who wrote this. but-
Well, it doesn't directly say that Moses, well, some of them kinda do, though.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and so,
And maybe the title has changed a little bit.
but probably the biggest problem you can see in that right off is you read the book of Exodus, and it's not written in the first person.
Well, but a lot of things are written not in the
Every-
first person.
Every book in the Old Testament, except Ezra and Nehemiah, is written that way. And then you have in Deuteronomy, in chapter 34, you have a description of the death of Moses. So, that couldn't have been written by Moses, and I will heartily agree, that could not have been written by Moses. So you've gotta reconcile that somehow. And it's not hard to do. I mean, if this happened in the middle of the 15th century BC, and Moses wrote it down, and he had to write it down somewhere around there. He died an old man, but he wasn't 1,000 years old. And you've got to reconcile that. And like I said, if it was written as long ago as it was, it probably wasn't written down in a book like this. Moses probably, I don't remember for sure what they were using and if they were moved beyond stones. I don't think so, but I don't remember. But let's just say they were writing on stones back then, yeah. Well, there'd be a lot of rocks to carry around. And I'm sure they were real flat, but still, it's a rock. And Moses would have, and I don't think Moses probably was the one doing that. There were probably fellas that had a talent for doing that. And Moses dictated that, just like the letters of Paul. You come into, you read some of the letters of Paul, and he'll, at the end, he'll say, see how large my writing is, I'm signing this
In my own hand.
in my own hand, and he didn't write that, he dictated it. And so, is it such a stretch to think that Moses had these writings, these stones that were here and there, and maybe in a pile, and during maybe Ezra's time, and were or before, and then some scribes compiled those and put them in a book? That sounds reasonable. We have a long history of compilers and scribes, and the people in the nation preserved those, whatever Moses wrote upon, but somebody had to gather it all together and compile it. And that seems to me probably is what happened. And so that's how we get the death of Moses at the end of the Pentateuch, at the end of the Torah. It was just the scribe just added that in there, because that was the history. That's how it ended. That's how his life ended. But then do we go back and hold the whole Torah in suspicion and say, well, this was a scribal addition? That's not necessary. But when we look at it as written in the third person, well, that kind of makes sense then. Because somebody writing from compiling from ancient notes and literature that Moses had written, there's not a stretch to think he wouldn't write that in the third person and say, well, Moses did this, and Moses done that, and when Moses had grown up, that seems perfectly reasonable. Well, I guess I don't have an issue with reconciling that. And that is the most obvious, looks to me like obvious argument for Moses not being the author of the Torah, would be that it's when Moses is involved, it's in the third person, and we have the account of Moses' death. And we know from elsewhere in Scripture that Moses was the human author, and the account has his slant and his personality. The real author is the Holy Spirit working in Moses. And so I guess I don't see it as a big issue. Not that Moses is not the author, but that Moses is the author, and how do you reconcile that with the style of writing? I think Moses is the author, and I don't have trouble reconciling that. Okay. That kind of makes sense, or anybody got something to add to that?
That makes sense. It also makes sense that the academic people are just looking for something that
Yeah.
says different and
Complicates
clear
stuff that
eyes of
kinda-
bloodshot.
Oh, I had surgery on that one last week. They did to that one what they did to that one.
Oh. Did it help?
it's clear, yeah, I got a ways to go before I can see well out of it, but the junk's all gone, so, yeah, that is good.
That's good.
Okay. So, next question we could ask before we get into it is, how are we to read it, this book of Exodus? I thought of three ways that are, that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's probably more. But the first one would be only as history, which has no bearing on us. It's just a historical fact that we would read like any other history. It has no bearing on us. The second way we could read it is to use it to extract principles of social justice for the influence of our government. That's a very common way that these stories are handled in the whole community of liberation theology.
Would you say that again slowly?
Use it to extract principles of social justice for the influence of our government. And I specifically mentioned various liberation theologies. They land in Exodus a lot. And they see it as a battle between oppressed and oppressor. And they filter their experiences of, well, generally being oppressed through the story of the Exodus. You also see that in not only in liberation theologies, but in a lot of liberal theologies as well. Where the focus is on what we can do to improve the human condition, mainly through in areas of social justice by the influence of our government. Very, very prevalent and common in liberal circles. And Exodus is used a lot in that regard, as well as sections of other sections of the Torah, particularly in the law, although they tend to pick and choose. Right now, they seem to be landing on the text in, I don't remember what book of the law it's in, but not oppressing the sojourner. You hear that a lot in liberal circles nowadays, and social justice, and how we try not to oppress the sojourner. Okay. So that's the second way that Exodus, or it is read. The third way is, we could read it as history with a view towards Christ. As the glory of God. In salvation through judgment.
I got as far as history with a view towards Christ as the glory of God.
In salvation through judgment. That phrase is on my front burner here the last couple of weeks. The glory of God and salvation through judgment. Started reading a book, I don't remember the title of it now, but that's the author's looking for a meta-narrative of the Bible. And he put forth that statement, meta-narrative, the overarching narrative of the Bible, what is, everything is under, so to speak, and he proposes that overarching statement would be the glory of God in salvation through judgment. And I found that interesting, I'm intrigued by that, and the more I read this, get into this book, the more I'm agreeing with him. And in Exodus, you really see that. God saving his people through judgment. You're looking a little confused, maybe I better explain that a little bit. You have God bringing his people out of Egypt while judging the Egyptians.
Mm.
And
What?
and he doesn't bring them all the way to the promised land because he judges the people for their sins.
But then he does, he saves the next generation.
Yeah.
Salvation of God through judgment. And they're so interconnected and close, in such close proximity throughout the scriptures. And it's just all over, like Carolyn just powered that one right off the top of your head, and yeah, they're just all over. And I just find that compelling as for and not that this, and that is the glory of God in salvation through judgment.
Okay, God bringing his people out of
Egypt.
and there was the rest of it. What was the rest of it?
Well, he judged the Egyptians in doing that. They're in such close proximity, the salvation and the judgment. And the salvation is through the judgment.
But that's not the way you said it originally.
I thought you said without judging the Egyptians. You didn't say that.
No, I did not say that. I didn't mean to say
Okay,
that. If I did, I'm
okay.
sorry.
Okay, so he judged the Egyptians finding them at fault. And then that's why he made the waters turn red with blood. Is that part of it?
That's all part of the story, yeah, that's just
but
to increase.
That's part of the judgment?
No, that's to demonstrate their suitedness for judgment, I guess,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. And some of them, that's painting with a broad brush here, because coming out of Israel, there was a mixed multitude. There were some Egyptians that got saved. But by and large, there was salvation through judgment. And then we saw it immediately at the parting of the Red Sea. There's another picture of salvation where the Red Sea was parted. All the Israelites went through. They were saved. Pharaoh and his chariots started through there, got confused, mired in the mud, and the water closed over them. Judgment.
So the first statement you made was that God bringing his people out of Egypt by turning them over to the Egyptians? It was something like that, the very first thing you said.
Well, that wasn't it.
I thought it said that God bringing his people out of Egypt through judgment.
He said that later. Yeah, but
I think that's what I remember, but I didn't write it down right away.
So,
Bringing his people out of Egypt through judgment?
Yeah.
By
By
salvation through
judging the
judgment.
Egyptians,
Mhm.
okay.
Judgment of the Egyptians.
Yeah,
Salvation through judgment,
yeah.
okay.
And that's the glory of God in salvation through judgment.
You separate the two.
Maybe to make that clear, and it'll be, no, I'm not going to say anything more, but in Romans chapter 9, remember we're looking for this, how does salvation through judgment glorify God? We can see how well salvation, yeah, through judgment. What's that got to do with God's glory? Well, in Romans 9, and this is the story of, this is pertinent to where we're at. We'll probably be in Romans 9 a little bit here, because it speaks of the Exodus.
Okay, wait just a minute. Romans 9:5, right?
Well, I'm just trying to see where I want to start.
All right. How God does,
Well, maybe verse 15.
Romans 9:15.
how does God, how is God glorified through judgment? Is that what you said?
Well, no, I said, well, we don't have any trouble with seeing how God is glorified in salvation. But salvation through judgment, we have a hard time connecting.
Okay.
Well, how is God glorified in judgment?
All right, just a second.
His power, his wisdom.
Yeah, but we see that in I like when you answer like that so biblically.
Oh, I didn't know.
So I'm preaching to the choir here, but we're gonna go to Romans 9, starting in verse 15. And for he, God, says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God, who has mercy. This is salvation. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have, and here he's quoting Exodus, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then, he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me this way? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honored use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath, this is judgment, and to make known his power, what Becky was talking about here, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction in order. That's not the end of it. This judgment is not the end of it. Something comes through this judgment in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles. So there we, that is probably one of the clear statements of that in the
Yeah.
New Testament, the glory of God and salvation through judgment. And it better displays his glory. If salvation was just hanging out there, it would be kind of no big deal, I suppose. It would be a big deal, but it wouldn't be as big a deal unless you put it against the backdrop of judgment. And that brings it out all the more. And we see the glory of God in it, in the salvation through judgment.
Is this a good time?
That's fine. I don't mind, 8 o'clock. I was thinking we were gonna run short. Look the title of that book up. That is you're a book reader, aren't you?
I'm a this book reader, that's.
Yeah, I am
it's
too, but
I know, but I don't get any farther than that.
I was that
Someday
way
I
for a
might.
long time.
But I just don't wanna do that because I don't know this.
Well, that's true.
It's okay.
I'm still gonna look up the title of the author
Look
because
it
I
up.
don't, I
Yeah.
don't remember what it is right now.
And I'll write it down because I might be ready for that. I might still be alive for that.
Okay, I think this is it here. Let's see.
You tell us on the.
Book info. There it is.
God's glory and salvation through judgment. James Hamilton. still reading this, trying to make sense. God reveals himself as a God who is merciful and just. James Hamilton contends that from this passage, I guess I need to read Exodus 34, comes the biblical theology that unites the meta-narrative. What's that?
The overarching narrative,
The meta
Yeah.
is big.
or messianic narrative could be, I don't know, but that would be, yeah, that, what is overarching the whole of scripture.
This second paragraph I started, and that makes more sense. I gotta read Exodus 34, and I'll have to do that in a few minutes.
That's fine.
Your shoes.
Yes. Insert. But I also realized when the other pair of shoes to create static electricity enough that I can hold on to a car and I go touch the elevator, create a spark. Ah, the jolt. Ouch.
But those shoes don't do that?
Well, these do too, but it's the friction. So it can't, when it's not even the winter time, I can generate a jolt of electricity. More importantly, when at the gas station, I try to touch something else
First.
first before the nozzle. And I know that I saw a picture that they said well, biblically, the first person that had a tablet was Moses on
Read
Facebook.
about- Yeah,
Yeah.
I read something
Yeah.
about.
And someone commented, it was
And there
like,
was something more to it than that.
yeah.
Can't remember the rest of it.
I have to go back to it because I know I have it on my profile, but saying the first official tablet that worked and didn't run on batteries.
Mhm. No word yet. My granddaughter Kaya was in a tennis match tonight in Texas, and I was looking for the results, but
How old is
she
she?
isn't 11.
Okay. A tennis match in Texas? They
It's a
don't live there.
national. No, they live in Connecticut.
Ah,
It's a
that's what I
national
thought.
tournament.
She must be pretty good.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they had that for kids that young.
8 through, her sister's there too. She's only 9. But
So the
Anyway.
youngest one is the one that has gotten the farthest?
no, not this
No.
time. Last year, yes,
Okay.
but this year, no. But she did well too. They both did very well. And that's, well, this is, I'll tell you that next part later, if we get around to it.
Tell me the name of that author again. It's James something.
James M. Hamilton Jr.
What did he write?
The book that,
God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment, a Biblical Theology.
James A. Hamilton Jr.
For those of you who use logos, it's on there.
Okay.
What's that logo?
That's that,
Bible software that
we talked about that before. I think we were gonna look to see if we could get it on your computer, but I don't know if we did or not.
I don't think we did.
We probably can.
Okay, so how are we, gonna read this book? I'm going to look at it as the third way that I outlined here, as a history with a view towards Christ as the glory of God and salvation through judgment. We don't have salvation and judgment apart from Jesus Christ. So he figures prominently in this book as well. And then I added on here, which the human author, Moses, did not fully understand. So a common approach to studying these books is to stick strictly, is to immerse yourself in the time and stick strictly, or attempt to stick strictly with what the author meant when he wrote it, which sounds completely reasonable. But we're not dealing with typical writing, we're dealing with Bible. And so Bible is a book of progressive revelation, where things are dark and shadowy and then progressively are brought into the light as we progress through the scriptures. And so we take a very early time period, which is when Exodus was written, and we can't park our understanding of and our learning of Paul's writing and not see it in Exodus.
The Bible's a book of progressive
Revelation.
writing. Revelation, and that's
Yeah.
writing of Revelation.
And this author Moses wrote in a time, how did you finish that sentence?
It was very early in redemptive history, and it was not fully, Christ was not fully understood. There was shadows of a messianic figure, a savior to come, but it wasn't fully understood. Moses didn't know the whole story. And so we can't park our brains and try and get into Moses' shoes and read Moses' writing strictly the way he wrote it, without inserting New Testament theology into it. First Peter 1:10-12. Kind of gives us a green light on that. Where he says, concerning this salvation, salvation the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully. So these are the Old Testament writers, the prophets who prophesied about the grace. They spoke of this salvation. If you're gonna flip to it, I'll read.
And then you can start reading again.
1 Peter 1:10.
Yeah. Okay.
Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, inquiring what person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the subsequent glories. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves, but you in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. So Peter is saying here that these authors in the Old Testament, they didn't know for sure what they were writing about. They saw what was in front of them, but they couldn't go beyond that. But it said the Spirit of Christ was in them, telling them there was more beyond what they were writing. And it was for a future time. But that was kind of frustrating. And it says, things into which angels long to look. Well, angels weren't even privy to that, and they longed for it. Those angels were longing for it. How much more was Moses, who was living it? So, Moses did not fully understand all that he was writing, although he had an inkling that it was something more. So when we come to these writings of we're in Moses now, so when we come to the writing of Moses, that we are not going to limit ourselves to the mid-15th century BC. We are going to get behind these accounts and see Christ as the glory of God and salvation through judgment. Okay. So, now we come to the text. I'm going to read Exodus 1 through 7. Opening paragraph. Until Becky gets done, Kyle gets done right there.
Thank you.
Okay, so Exodus 1 through 7. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All these descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Okay. What struck me right off the bat was it says, these are the names of the son of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. Jacob and Israel are the same guy. So there's got to be some meaning there. The Israel wasn't
Well, sons of Israel
Yeah.
came with Jacob, their dad.
yeah, but there got to be a reason he used
Why
both
they-
those names
why they
here
used them
for
both.
Jacob. And Israel is the covenant name of Jacob. In Genesis 35, 1 through 15, we have that word, is in Genesis 35, 1 through 15. It says, God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were on in their ears, and Jacob hid them under a terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel. So he called its name Elon Bakuth. God appeared to Jacob again when he came to Paddan Aram and blessed him. Came from Paddan Aram. He's in Bethel now. This is where he was found that rock when he first left his mom and dad to escape from Esau. And he laid his head on a rock and woke up, and he saw the stairs going up to heaven and angels ascending and descending on them. And he said, this is a holy place, and this is where he's at again now after all these years. God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Paddan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. So he has called his name Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company. Here's the covenant God is making, is reaffirming with Jacob. The covenant he made with Abraham and the covenant he made with Isaac. Here he is reaffirming it with the grandson of Abraham, Jacob. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken to him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. Okay,
Tell me where that was again, Mike, please.
that's in Genesis 35, 1 through 15. That's where we get that, that's why I said it was a covenant name, because at the time that God spoke his covenant to Jacob, he called him Israel. And so, what this is pointing to here, where it says, these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, is that this is part of that promise, part of that covenant. And it's a demonstration of God's sovereignty in Genesis 35, when God promises that, says he's going to do it. And now we learn that this coming to Egypt is a part of that, because it doesn't look like it. You can't read Exodus apart from Genesis. You're kind of jumping in the middle here. That's going to kind of be difficult. But I think we're all familiar with Genesis enough to have no trouble picking it up. But we'll bounce back and forth here a little bit in that. But now we see in the book of Exodus, God acting out his sovereignty by his providence. And providence is God's sovereignty acted out. I printed off Wayne Grudem's definition of providence from his systematic theology here. He says, we may define God's providence as follows. God is continually involved with all creation. You don't have to write this down, I'll hand you a copy here in a second.
Oh, good.
God is continually involved with all created things in such a way that he, one, keeps them existing and maintaining the properties with which he created them. Maybe I better hand that out now. Okay. We may define God's providence as follows. God is continually involved with all created things in such a way that he, one, keeps them existing and maintaining the properties with which he created them. So he created everything, and in his providence, he upholds everything. And he assures that they maintain the properties with which he created them.
Okay, so talk about the definition of properties here, because it's not physical properties, correct? It's,
Okay,
it's their-
he created dogs that bark. It's the property of
It's
a
their-
dog to bark.
yeah, it's
A
their,
dog will not get up tomorrow and meow.
good,
That's due to God's maintaining the properties with which he created them.
the characteristics,
Okay.
I mean, is that,
Well, more
Is
a
that-
characteristic, it's the essence of what and who they are.
okay. We just don't use properties that well very, but,
My characteristic when I was born was to have black hair. That changed.
Yeah, I can identify with that.
My properties were that I was born a man. That does not change. God upholds that. He maintains that. And he keeps me existing.
You said something else besides characteristics. You said, you remember, Deb?
Maintains the essence of who they
Essence.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you.
so these are all under, this is all God's providence here. And so that's the degree that God maintains stuff. It's, well,
I want you to finish what you were saying first.
it's the degree that God maintains stuff.
Okay,
It's to that degree.
okay.
He doesn't, we're not left to our own devices to, if God wasn't, maintaining the properties of his creation, it would be chaos.
And so that really takes me to global warming, which there are church people who say that God won't let that happen, that the earth won't be destroyed by anything because God will maintain it.
Actually, the Bible says that God is storing up the earth to be destroyed by fire.
Yes, but he's going to do that.
Well, he does it by means.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's,
Yeah.
but we're talking about the glaciers thawing out and all the hurricanes that are coming, as you said, and I know you've said that that's part of his plan, but there are people who are saying that global warming isn't real because God wouldn't let that happen. You haven't heard
Why
that?
wouldn't he let that happen? I'd ask them.
Well, first of all, because it says right here, I thought maybe this is where they got that information or came to believe it. God is continually involved with all created things in such a way that he keeps them existing and maintaining their properties. Am I thinking wrong, Mike?
Oh, you're thinking that, what, you're reading this, that he's gonna keep things existing as they are now forever.
Yeah.
He's never gonna wrap it up.
Well, no, I'm thinking until he decides to wrap it up. I know that there's a time he's going to wrap it up, but
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say that. But I don't see where that would play into,
saving the
the
environment.
temperature of the earth. I don't,
Well, that's,
I mean, you go back, don't have to go back too far, they had a period that was a few thousand years long, they called the Little Ice Age. And before that, this was a swampland all the way up into Canada that was hot. And so that has been, that's just a characteristic of, or a property of the earth that we live on. So I don't see, yeah. It seems to me that, I don't get why people can be so short-sighted that they think that the time is this short little 30 or 40 years that they've been around is the norm. Doesn't that seem like the height of arrogance to you? What we had 10 years ago is normal.
But now it's not normal anymore, cause
And we
it's
take such
changed.
a little, just the tiniest sliver. And we take a little sliver out of that, and that's the norm. And we ignore this whole vast created thing that has these properties that have been going on for thousands of years and have not had a set norm, but a range. So God keeps them existing and maintaining the properties with which He created them. I don't see where that would have any bearing on, well, it was colder last year than it is this year. It seems to me that that's a pointless statement. I don't get it.
Well, I see your point. But the world is changing. I mean, it has since time began. It changed. The continents have
So that's
changed.
But
norm.
it hasn't changed into a big lump of butter,
Okay,
to be silly.
okay.
It's still the earth, and it still has a climate, and it fluctuates within a defined range.
And it's moved apart, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the continents have moved apart and,
I guess, I don't know, that's what they say, and I'm not gonna argue with them, I don't know.
so the norm is change,
Within a confined
yeah.
realm, yes. That's why I use that example, the dogs don't start meowing. They're not designed to meow, they're designed to bark. So that God keeps the world existing and maintaining the properties with which He created it.
So rocks are always rocks, but
Yeah.
they might move someplace else.
Yeah, but we're not gonna wake up tomorrow and all the rocks have turned into marshmallows.
Yeah, but not silly. Yeah, but rocks will always be rocks.
Yeah.
Water will always be water.
Yeah, I mean, and but the bigger thing is that we learn in Scripture that that's God doing that. Or more specifically, that's Jesus Christ doing that. We learn in Colossians 1 that Jesus is the one that holds all things together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an area of God's providence.
Okay.
So He keeps things existing and maintaining the properties with which He created them. And number 2, cooperates with created things in every action, directing their distinctive properties to cause them to act as they do. And 3, directs them to fulfill His purpose.
So there's the change. Number 2 would include the changes that we see.
Okay. But again, it's a statement of God's providence, which is His sovereignty acted out. And here he cooperates with created things. He doesn't cause dogs to meow, although He could, in every action, and He directs their distinctive properties, the barking, to cause them to act as they do. And directs them to fulfill His purpose. So we have an overarching purpose of God. And everything is directed by God towards that.
book is Systematic Theology
Yeah,
And-
Wayne Gruden.
and Introduction to
Systematic.
Biblical Doctrine.
Yeah, that's a good systematic theology book. If you're into systematic theology, so.
Never heard of it before.
Oh, really? Oh, well, there's a lot of systematic theologies. Okay. So, providence of God. We have the 12 sons plus Jacob come together in Egypt. Back in Exodus here. That was under the providence of God, as we define there. And it says that that's all the descendants, 70 persons, all the 12 sons of Jacob. None of those 12 have died. That's very unusual for this time in history. That none of those 12 boys died. They've all lived and all are brought together in Egypt. And Joseph is in Egypt by God's providence. We read that in Genesis 45. To the left there, a few pages to Genesis 45. And beginning in verse 1. This is when we have Joseph is the second in command over all of Egypt, if you remember. And there's a famine. There's 7 years of plenty and there's 7 years of plague, and Jacob and the 11 boys up in Canaan are in the midst of that famine, and Jacob sends them down to get some grain from Egypt because they don't know it's Joseph is the second in command now over and has control over that. And they get some grain and go back, and then they run out, and they were afraid to go back because it looked like they stole it. And they didn't bring, the first time, they didn't bring Benjamin down because that was Jacob's favorite son after Joseph was sold into slavery by his 10 brothers. And Joseph said, don't come back here again unless you bring your brother Benjamin. And Jacob finally relents and says, okay, take him. You gotta get something to eat. And so they go down and have audience with Joseph again, but they still don't know it's Joseph. And they brought Benjamin, and Joseph says, you gotta leave Benjamin here. And then I'll back up and read this because I just noticed this today and I thought it was kind of neat story here. When Joseph said we gotta leave Benjamin, and they said, oh, we can't do that, the old man will die if he doesn't come back. Then Judah, and I'm gonna go back to chapter 44 and verse 18. Then Judah went up to him and said, oh my Lord, went up to Joseph. He doesn't know this is his brother Joseph. This is Judah. Went up to him, oh my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ear, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. Child or brother that's dead, of course, they think is Joseph, and his father loves him. But you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father, the father would die. Then you said to the servants, unless this youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And then when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother goes
With us, then we will.
with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then the servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons, one left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol. Now therefore, as soon as I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that boy is not with us, he will die, and your servant will bring down the gray hairs of your servant my father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy my father, saying, if I do not bring him back, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. Now what I think interesting is that Judah is talking, and Judah puts himself forward as a substitute for Benjamin, offering to take Benjamin's place. And Judah is in the line of the seed, is in the line that Christ comes from. Christ is of the tribe of Judah. And Christ is our, what the Puritans said, great exchange. Christ took our place in judgment. And here we have a picture of Judah taking Benjamin's place in judgment. I just hadn't seen that before. I thought that was interesting. But it's kind of an aside.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a beautiful picture, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, and so relevant when we're thinking about the New Testament, how it connects with the Old Testament.
Yeah. But then in chapter 45, it says, then Joseph, I'm just continuing where I left off, then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it. And the household of Pharaoh said, lost my place.
Where are you?
It's in 45.
45,
I'm just
but where?
continuing.
Where in 45?
Verse
Lost his
1.
place. It started with 1.
Verse 1. I was just
Oh, okay.
continued reading from where I left off.
I know, but I can't remember where you left off.
The end of 44.
Oh, but you read part of 45. That's, okay. So you just started at the beginning of 45.
Yeah.
Okay.
45:3. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, Come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. So here we have the providence of God in this act here of those brothers of Joseph selling him into slavery. And there's an in order that, and it's in order to preserve them. It's in order to make sure Judah survives. He's in the line of Christ, and he's going to continue that line. So we have here in Grudem's definition of providence, number 2, God cooperates with created things in every action, directing their distinctive properties to cause them to act as they do, and directs them to fulfill his purpose. Now overlay that on top of what I just read, where those brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and Joseph sees God's providence in that. So, according to this, God was cooperating with those 10 brothers in every action in their evil of selling their brother into slavery, and directed their distinctive properties. They hated him. They couldn't speak his name. That was a distinctive property that they had. They hated him, to cause them to act as they do, and directs them to fulfill his purpose. That's the in order that we read there, in order to preserve a remnant. Well, that's a picture of God's providence. Sometimes we think of God's providence as maybe we think of it more like Christian luck.
It's always good.
Yeah. If we win the lottery, that was providential. Christian luck. But do we think of it in these terms like we just read here, as it's described in the Bible? Okay. So other areas of God's providence in the life of Joseph that was sold into slavery, we just talked about that. But then he was accused by Potiphar's wife. We remember that story. When she accused Joseph of raping her, and he didn't do it. He ran away. But who's Potiphar gonna believe? He believes his wife, and so he throws Joseph into prison. And it just happens to be the prison of Pharaoh. It wasn't some obscure jail on the outskirts of Egypt. And pretty soon Pharaoh's cupbearer finds itself in prison with Joseph. And has a dream, and Joseph interprets the dream. And then Pharaoh has a dream. And the cupbearer says, oh, I remember this fella down in jail. Bring him up, he'll interpret it. So Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh appoints Joseph second in command. That's all of God's providence in there. And none of it is luck or fate. It's God directing them to fulfill His purpose. And that isn't, and you'll notice that wasn't just Joseph, that was Pharaoh and the cupbearer and Potiphar and his wife. All under the realm of God's providence.
And Judah.
Hmm?
And Judah. And Dan and all of his brothers.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking outside of the Jacob's family. See, sometimes we think of God's providence as only working within the Christian community. And people and things outside of the Christian community are outside of God's providence, that they're on their own. Because we have the Potiphar and his wife, and Pharaoh and the cupbearer, all acting under the providence of God, but not outside of their distinctive providence.
Mm.
Okay. So Joseph believed God's promises. He was in Egypt for 23 years. And he didn't, when he spoke to his brothers about God brought him into Egypt, that we can interpret from that he knew the promises that God had made to his dad, Jacob, and to his grandpa Isaac and great-grandfather Abraham. He was well aware, and that they were going to be a great nation. And Joseph believed that. And so he looked right past that evil done by his brothers to God. And I would imagine that whole time he was down there, those 23 or 22 years before his brothers came, he believed those promises of God, that the descendants of his father would be as the sand of the seashore and blessed as all the nations. But he just thought he was probably not going to be a part of it. Because now he's removed. And he's in Egypt. And he's not yet now. But then it all comes to him. And it just, he had to be just blown away. And he said, wow, that's really cool. And this is all God's work. And even my coming down here, it's in order to see those promises come to fruition. And those promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are all recorded in Genesis. The covenant made with the promise to Abraham is in Genesis 12, 1-3, and then restated in Genesis 15, 5-6, where Abraham's descendants are gonna be like the sand of the seashore and like the stars in the heavens. And Abraham was 100 years old and his wife was 90 and they didn't have any children. And Abraham believed him, and it was counted to Abraham as righteousness. And then it was, God restated the promise of sand, descendants like the sand and the stars to Isaac in Genesis 26, 1-5. Isaac was Abraham's son and had one son. Isaac had two, Jacob and Esau. And the promise was restated to Isaac that his descendants would be as numerous as the sand of the seashore and stars in heaven. I'm sure that didn't look very promising because he had two boys. To put the program here a little bit. Then we have Jacob comes on the scene. Isaac's son Jacob, Esau went his own way, of course. Jacob had the promise renewed to him, Genesis 35, 9-12. And Jacob had 12 sons. So now
He's getting better.
it's picking up. It's picking up. Yeah. Yeah. So now we see this promise becoming a little more, get some legs under it. Okay. So then, we go back to Exodus here, and we have that account of all the family of Jacob that went down to Egypt, 70 persons it says in verse 5. And Joseph was already in Egypt. And then in verse 6 it says, then Joseph died. So we have all that account that we just talked about, this life of Joseph, and what it says in Exodus is that then Joseph died. And all his brothers, and all that generation. So all 12 of the boys, they died, of course. But the people of Israel, out of those 12, were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. So now they're really increasing. So the language here in verse 7, though, it kind of points to that this is looking at, it's more than what is written here. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. And what that is echoing is in Genesis 1:28. We're after the account of God creating man. So God created, in verse 27 it says, so God created man in his own image. He created, in the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. That sound familiar to that language where the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly, they multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. It's similar enough to where I think it's pointing to it's pointing us back to Genesis, to the creation. So we have the creation of man described in those same terms, the creation of Adam and Eve. In paradise, they were created good, everything was good before the fall. And they were given the charge to be fruitful and multiply. And now we have this nation of Israel, God's image of God's people, and it's like a recreation, and they are told to be fruitful, or said that they were fruitful and multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that they filled the land. So it just kind of echoes back to that creation story, and we kind of see a new creation here, something different is going to happen here in this group of people. Israel is a type. We talked about that before, a type of God's people. Okay, well, it's 9 o'clock. So, I'm not gonna have enough time to get through the rest of this. So I guess we'll end with that. Anything anybody wants to add to that little introduction and getting started here?
Good beginning.
Hmm?
Good beginning.
Okay. Yeah, we're liable to be bouncing around the Bible a lot in this study, I'm thinking. And that's the only way I can approach it. I will not be able to stay isolated to the book of Exodus without bringing in other parts. So next time, we'll finish up that little bit and God's providence, basically. And then we'll progress on and see what we can glean out of this new Pharaoh that is raised up and doesn't know Joseph. Thinks that this whole Israeli situation is a problem. She win?
I didn't look that up. I sent Becky this list of things about marriage.
Thank you.
So you can look.
Okay.
After our prayer, I'll look.
Hmm?
After our prayer, I'll look.
Okay.
Let's get things in the right order.
Well, then you have a prayer.
I can do that.
All right.
Holy God, you have blessed us with a day focused on you. As every day should be. Help us to live each day and remember continually that you are our focus. We thank you for our 4 confirmands from this morning and their new witness to the congregation of what that they want to know you better. Help us to witness as well. You bring us together each Sunday evening to study your word, and thank you for guiding us to the beginning of Exodus, and it will be so rich in our understanding of you and where we are now as it has evolved, maybe that's not the right word, but you know, from the early books in the Bible and how it applies to us today. Then take it beyond that, Lord, to offer that to those around us, whomever they are, as you lead us to do that. In the precious name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Okay, look it up.
Okay. I'll look it up. She won.
Yay!
So I don't know what that means exactly. So the 1 seed and the 2 seed play each other tomorrow for the final champion.
Well, she must have played the 3rd seed then.
Well, actually, this other girl, beat the 3rd seed.
Oh, so she played the,
She played the person that beat the 3rd seed.
so now she's solidly in 3rd.
So I think so. I think that
Should
means
be.
she's on third,
Mhm.
in 3rd.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment.
Third in the nation?
For
11-year-old
Big nationals.
well,
girl.
of the girls that participated.
Nationals.
That doesn't,
Oh, don't
That's
qualify
not
it too much, Grandma. Take it and revel in the glory.
well, they are, I'm sure.
So how old were they when they started playing
Oh,
tennis?
3. But they didn't play this kind when they were 3. I mean, they just started playing with their mom at home.
3-year-old.
Which
At
says
3.
something that she does really well, the mom?
She's a teaching tennis pro, and that's her job.
Oh, okay.
So she's not
I
actually
still
their,
can't imagine 3-year-olds.
she's not actually their coach. Well, then they went to she teaches at a club, at a tennis club. Erica does, that's her mom, their mom, and so she would take them to the very youngest class of kids, and they would just try to run after the balls and get them back in the basket. I mean,
3-year-old.
3, yeah.
Wow.
And then finally they got a little racket and they would try to just hit the ball with the racket and just went from there. That's the way she grew up. Her parents, she lived in California, so she could play outdoors all the time, so. And her parents took her she was this only child and
So
She
were
was the
they
oldest.
tennis pros too?
no. Mm-mm. I don't know how they got started with the tennis thing, but. Her dad was from Germany and her mom was from Japan. But they met and lived in the United States. So,
Huh.
but they were born in those countries, so. It's an interesting
And she,
family.
and Erica went to Iowa State, is that where they met?
Erica, yeah, Erica thought she wanted to be a veterinarian, so she came to Iowa State to become a veterinarian. And she just happened to be a good tennis player, so she probably walked on. I don't think she got a scholarship to come as a tennis player. But I'm sure they were glad to see her when she
Probably.
wanted to be on their tennis team, so. But, and one of the interesting facts is that Jeff and Chris are both, members of the Triangle fraternity because Chris wanted to be an architect and Chris was a Triangle in the fraternity, and Chris knew Erica before Jeff ever got to school, because Erica's a little bit older than Jeff is. So Chris is the one that introduced Jeff and Erica.
Really?
Mhm.
So they were in that, you said triangle, is that like tri-delt or something?
No, it's Triangle, that's just the name of it, Triangle Fraternity. It's a fraternity for architects and engineers.
Okay.
But, so anyway, and then of course Jeff loved playing pickleball, so Jeff and Erica were the pickleball champions at Iowa State for at least 1 year.
Wow.
Well,
They
they
had
had good
pickleball?
training and.
They
Well,
had pickleball at
Iowa State, oh yeah,
as a sport?
well, as an intramural,
Oh, yeah, they do a lot of that,
Fun.
or they used to, I don't know if they
Yeah.
still do anymore.
It reminds me of pickleball days in high school.
yeah.
Never made it past the first round, but I got better.
Yep.
Thank you,
That's a
Mike.
little background story. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Who was the teacher at GR that did the pickleball?
Charlie.
Charlie, yeah, Charlie. Uh-huh.